Moving in with your children as you age may seem like a natural and comforting choice. It promises safety, support, and closeness to family. However, beneath this seemingly perfect solution, there can be a hidden cost to your independence, identity, and inner peace. While it may feel practical at first, living with family can unintentionally chip away at personal autonomy. Over time, the loss of privacy, adjusting to new routines, and changing family dynamics can deeply impact your well-being in ways that aren't always discussed. Though the decision to live with children is often rooted in love and practicality, it can lead to unspoken tensions or emotional shifts that affect your mental and emotional peace. In this video, we explore 9 ways that moving in with family can slowly erode your sense of independence. For those in their 70s or anyone thinking about their future, these reasons may resonate deeply. The goal is to reflect on these hidden challenges and give permission to seek more, whether it's more space, more independence, or simply more of what makes you feel whole again. Reason 1. Emotional distance and the strain of generational gaps. Moving in with your children doesn't always bridge the emotional gap you might expect. In fact, one of the most painful experiences for many older adults is the quiet realization of emotional isolation, even when they are surrounded by family. This feeling doesn't stem from neglect or malice. It emerges from something more complex: the gap between generations. Despite the love your children show, they are living in a world that may be vastly different from the one you know. Their priorities, daily stresses, and the pace of their lives are often out of sync with your own, creating a silent divide that can be hard to name but impossible to ignore. The rhythm of their lives, filled with work, social media, and constant movement, doesn't align with the slower pace that might suit you. Conversations that once felt natural now seem rushed, and shared meals are often distracted by phones and screens. Topics that are meaningful to you, your memories, your reflections, even your fears, can feel out of place in the hum of a busy household. You might sit in the same room as your children, but the distance feels almost tangible, as if you are a visitor from another time. Even when they ask how you're doing, there's a hesitation to answer honestly. You don't want to burden them with your feelings or appear dramatic, so you offer a polite smile, saying you're fine even when you're not. I remember Leonard, 73, who moved in with his daughter after a fall. The first few weeks were filled with warmth and attention, but soon life returned to its usual pace for them. Leonard found himself sitting alone for hours while his family went about their routines, and when they were home they were exhausted, distracted, and constantly on the go. One evening, Leonard shared a story from his time in the Navy, something he hadn't spoken about in years. But midway through, his grandson interrupted to ask for the Wi-Fi password, and the moment was lost. Leonard said, "I wasn't mad. I just realized there wasn't room for my world and their world anymore." That realization, the understanding that your experiences, your wisdom, and even your humor no longer have a place in the life you once shared, is a form of grief all its own. It's the quiet loss of emotional relevance. When your stories are no longer heard and your experiences no longer matter in the conversations around you, your inner world begins to shrink. You start speaking less, sharing less, and smiling more to cover the silence. Misunderstandings don't arise from conflict. They grow from absence. Absence of communication, of understanding, and of connection. You stop sharing because somewhere along the way you felt that no one was truly listening. The hardest part of this emotional isolation is that you still love them deeply. You still want to support them, to offer your wisdom and encouragement. But it becomes difficult to give from a place of emotional emptiness, and it's even harder to refill yourself in an environment where your feelings have nowhere to land. How do you navigate the emotional disconnect when the love remains, but the understanding falters? Reason 2. Hiding your needs to avoid being a burden. One of the most silent and unnoticed sacrifices that many older adults make when they move in with their children is the quiet act of silencing themselves. You stop expressing your needs. You stop sharing your discomforts. It's not because you don't feel them, but because you fear becoming a burden. Even in the most loving homes, this fear quietly takes hold. You don't want to be the reason someone has to adjust their plans. You don't want to disrupt the flow of their lives. Most of all, you don't want your presence to feel like it's making things harder for your children or their spouses. So you keep your thoughts to yourself. You don't mention the noise that keeps you awake at night or how the cold air in the house feels unbearable to your aging body. You tell yourself it's fine even when it's not. At first, this silence might feel virtuous, like you're doing the right thing by not inconveniencing anyone. But over time, the toll of suppressing your needs begins to build. Every time you choose silence over honesty, you silently reinforce the belief that your feelings are less important, that your voice doesn't deserve space. I remember Elaine, 73, a woman who had always been strong-willed and outspoken. But after moving in with her son and his family, she began to shrink. She stopped asking for help with groceries. She didn't mention that the new mattress was causing her back pain. When I asked her why, she told me, "They already do so much. I don't want to seem ungrateful." The word ungrateful haunts so many older adults. It becomes the measuring stick for every request, every complaint, and every moment of need. And because you don't want to cross that invisible line, you stay silent. But gratitude and honesty can coexist. Being thankful doesn't mean you stop being human. Suppressing your voice doesn't protect your family, it distances you from them. It creates a gap between your true self and the version of yourself you present to others. This self-silencing becomes a daily habit. You laugh when you want to sigh. You agree when you feel uncertain. After a while, you forget what it feels like to speak freely, to ask without guilt, to be seen not just as someone receiving help, but as someone still whole, still valid. The truth is, your children may never ask you to silence yourself. But when the environment makes you feel like you must, the outcome is just as painful. It becomes a quiet form of erasure, not because anyone demanded it, but because love made you afraid to take up space. And this loss is often invisible. When you stop asking for what you need, it's not just your comfort you lose, it's your connection to those around you and to yourself. You start to feel less like a full person and more like a shadow, fading slowly from the life you once led. If you're finding these insights valuable, leave a comment saying number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so and hit the bell to stay updated with more videos. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content to inform and inspire you. Let's keep going. Reason 3. The gradual loss of privacy and personal space. When you move in with your children, the warmth of family closeness often comes at the expense of something more subtle: your privacy. Sharing a home means sharing much more than just a roof. It involves sharing routines, personal space, energy, and often unspoken expectations. Over time, what once felt like a private domain starts to feel like public territory. It begins with seemingly insignificant moments. Someone entering your room without knocking, your mail being opened by mistake, or your personal items being borrowed without asking. At first, these moments may seem trivial, but they signal a shift that runs much deeper. The protected personal space you once had, where you could retreat and recharge, is no longer yours alone. The hardest part is that, as a guest in someone else's home, even if that someone is your child, you may feel like you no longer have the right to assert yourself. You don't want to cause tension, so you stay quiet, allowing the small intrusions to accumulate. Gradually, they become the new normal, and what once felt like a sanctuary now feels more like a shared space where your personal boundaries are constantly tested. This ongoing erosion of privacy can lead to a kind of quiet exhaustion. It's the mental and emotional drain that comes from constantly feeling on, from filtering your words, checking your tone, and worrying about whether you're intruding. It builds over time, especially when you realize that even in the place where you sleep, you can't fully relax. I think of Evelyn, 75, who moved in with her son after her husband passed away. She initially appreciated the company, but over time, she noticed that finding a quiet corner became nearly impossible. The television was always on. The children ran in and out of rooms. What used to be her peaceful evening ritual, tea, soft music, and journaling, turned into impromptu babysitting or helping with homework, often without being asked. She shared with me, "I used to have my little rituals before bed. Now, I go to bed holding my breath, hoping no one knocks." The loss of privacy doesn't just disrupt your habits. It chips away at your inner calm and self-sufficiency. It's not about anyone being deliberately intrusive. It's the subtle, constant sense that you're always under someone else's gaze. Nothing feels entirely your own anymore, and every part of your life seems to exist within the constraints of someone else's space and schedule. Boundaries are essential to emotional well-being at any age. They aren't about creating distance but about maintaining respect. Without them, your sense of identity within the family can become blurred. You may start to question your role. Are you a parent, a roommate, a helper, or something else entirely? This confusion doesn't just live within the walls of the house. It begins to take root in your mind. You begin to doubt your right to ask for space, to rest, or simply to exist without feeling like a burden. For someone who has lived a life of independence, this kind of uncertainty can be deeply unsettling. It creates a constant low-level unease, like you're occupying a space where you're both fully present and yet, in some ways, invisible. The emotional toll of such blurred boundaries can make it hard to feel at ease in your own skin, in your own home, even when surrounded by the people you love. Reason 4. The struggle for emotional validation. As you settle into life with your children, one of the most overlooked challenges can be the subtle erosion of emotional validation. For years, you've been the person who provided support, wisdom, and guidance to your loved ones, and in return you were often acknowledged, appreciated, and needed. But when you move in with your children, that balance can shift in ways that are difficult to understand or articulate. Suddenly, the emotional exchanges that once felt natural, those small gestures of appreciation, the heartfelt thank yous, the moments when your perspective was valued, start to feel fewer and farther between. You may find yourself in the strange position of being physically present but emotionally overlooked. Even if your children love you deeply, the nature of their lives may leave them too busy or distracted to provide the kind of emotional affirmation that once came easily. The gratitude that flowed freely before, when you were the one giving and helping, might seem harder to come by, as if your presence is no longer something to celebrate. This shift can feel particularly painful when you've spent a lifetime nurturing others and, in return, receiving the emotional connection that gave your life meaning. When you no longer feel like your emotions, your contributions, and your experience matter as much, it can create a quiet, nagging sadness. You may begin to question whether your worth is tied to what you can do for others, and whether you'll ever again feel like the emotional center of your family, the person whose presence makes a difference. I remember Ruth, 80, who had always been a pillar of emotional support for her children and grandchildren. After moving in with her daughter, she found herself sitting quietly in the living room, watching the family interact without being included in the conversations. She said, "I'm here, but I don't feel like I'm really here. No one seems to need my advice or even just to talk to me like they used to." This lack of emotional validation isn't about seeking constant praise, but about feeling recognized, seen, and heard for the person you are, not just for what you can give. As time goes on, the absence of these emotional exchanges can leave you feeling disconnected, not just from your family but from yourself. You begin to wonder if your presence is truly valued, and whether you still have a meaningful role to play in the emotional life of the people you love. Without this kind of emotional validation, the foundation of your identity begins to feel fragile, and the loneliness becomes more profound. It's not about physical isolation, it's about feeling unseen, unappreciated, or even invisible in the very space where you once mattered most. This kind of emotional quietness is often unspoken, but its impact can be long-lasting and deeply felt. This is the hidden cost of being surrounded by family. When you stop feeling emotionally acknowledged, you begin to lose touch with the essence of who you are. How do you reconnect with your own emotional value when it feels like your presence no longer brings the validation you once received so freely? If you're finding these insights valuable, leave a comment saying number 4 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so and hit the bell to stay updated with more videos. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content to inform and inspire you. Let's keep going. Reason 5. Loss of purpose and role within the family. One of the most profound changes you may experience after moving in with your children is the gradual fading of your role within the family. The responsibilities you once held, the decisions you made, and the small, yet significant ways you contributed to the flow of everyday life. The quiet sense of purpose that guided your mornings and gave structure to your days begins to slip away. This shift doesn't happen abruptly, and there's no clear moment when your role is taken from you. Instead, it unfolds slowly, almost imperceptibly. The meals you once planned, the lists you used to make, and the fixes you performed around the house become tasks that are no longer yours to manage. You no longer hold the position of the first person someone turns to for advice. Gradually, you transition from being an active participant in the family's life to a passive observer. This change can feel especially painful for those who spent decades being the steadying force, the anchor, the problem solver, the giver, the one who kept everything moving. And suddenly your days are quieter, more undefined, and at times even empty. It's not the kind of loneliness that comes from physical isolation, but rather the kind that stems from feeling unneeded and irrelevant. I think of Charles, 81, who had always been the one to handle the lawn, balance the checkbook, and fix whatever broke around the house. After moving in with his daughter, he tried to offer help, but they would often say, "Don't worry about it, we've got it." At first, he welcomed the rest, but over time, the absence of responsibility began to weigh on him. He confided, "I just want to matter again. I want to feel like there's something I still bring to the table." This desire to be useful isn't about pride or ego, it's about meaning. At any age, we need a sense of purpose, and when that sense fades, our days can begin to feel hollow, like we're simply passing through time. Even when your family is acting out of love, trying to make your life easier, they may unknowingly take away the very things that once kept you grounded. When you no longer feel essential, when you no longer have a role to play, it's easy to start questioning why you're even there, not in a dramatic way but in a quiet, aching way. Because without a role, you lose a part of your identity. You stop seeing yourself through the eyes of the person you once were and begin to see yourself through the lens of what's missing. This, perhaps more than anything else, is what makes the sacrifice of moving in with your children so complex. It's not about the space you occupy, the food you share, or the routines you follow. It's about the slow, quiet disappearance of the role you once played in the family story you helped create. And that loss, though subtle, can leave an emotional void that's harder to fill than any physical need. Reason 6. Disruption of long-standing habits and daily rhythms. After years of shaping your life around routines and habits that align with your needs and personality, these small, daily practices become more than just actions. They become vital parts of your identity. They are the quiet, consistent rhythms that anchor you, offering a sense of stability, comfort, and even healing. These routines, whether it's the time you wake up, the way you enjoy your morning coffee, or the music that fills your space as you read, are carefully crafted over time to fit your lifestyle. But when you move in with your children, even the most familiar and cherished habits can dissolve without warning. Suddenly, you find yourself not just adjusting to someone else's schedule, but to an entirely different way of living. One that may be louder, faster, or simply out of sync with what you've known for so long. The pace of the household, with its own tempo, becomes the new rhythm you must follow. And while some may adapt quickly, for many, the quiet stress of having to reshape their days around unfamiliar patterns is overwhelming. You may feel a sense of guilt for struggling with what seem like small changes to others, like missing your morning walk or not being able to enjoy a quiet cup of coffee before the day begins. I remember Henry, a 77-year-old man who had a deeply ingrained habit of taking a peaceful walk every morning at 7 a.m. He described it as his time to connect with the world, the birds, and the neighborhood waking up at its own pace. But when he moved in with his daughter's family, his morning was no longer his own. Instead, it was filled with the sounds of rushing children, barking dogs, and hurried breakfasts. His walk, once a grounding ritual, was gradually edged out, and when he tried to bring it back, he was told it no longer fit into the family's hectic morning routine. The decision to stop requesting something so simple, something that had once been a core part of his peace, marked the beginning of a subtle erosion of his sense of self. It's easy to overlook how deeply these routines are tied to who we are. They are declarations of personhood. They affirm, "This is my life. This is how I choose to live." When these rituals are lost, it's not just a matter of comfort being displaced, it's a loss of emotional grounding, of clarity about what your life means and who you are becoming. Over time, this can lead to a quiet, persistent sense of disorientation that lingers without an obvious cause, yet is deeply felt. Because when your day no longer feels like your own, it can seem as though your life is no longer yours to live. This shift can be a profound experience, one that may slowly erode the very foundation of your sense of self. How do you manage the emotional toll of such changes? And have you noticed how small habits, often invisible to others, can be such vital parts of how you feel grounded in your own life? If you're finding these insights valuable, leave a comment saying number 6 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so and hit the bell to stay updated with more videos. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content to inform and inspire you. Let's keep going. Reason 7. Loss of financial autonomy and decision-making. One of the most subtle, yet significant changes when moving in with your children is how it can impact your financial independence. Initially, there's a sense of relief. You're no longer responsible for rent, utilities, or maybe even meals. It feels like a financial weight has been lifted. However, over time, the shift from managing your own finances to being dependent on someone else can quietly chip away at your sense of control. At first, you might offer to contribute to groceries or share in some household expenses, but even that gesture can feel less empowering when you're no longer the one in charge of budgeting or making the financial decisions. In some cases, your children may start managing more of your financial life, handling bank transfers, dealing with prescriptions, or scheduling appointments. While they may do so out of genuine concern, their involvement can sometimes mean that your choices are made without your full participation or awareness. Sometimes, this shift occurs because you've explicitly asked for help, but in many cases, it happens without you ever voicing a need. Regardless of the reason, the result is the same. You move from being the person who made the decisions to someone who is simply part of a system you didn't design. This can become especially difficult when it comes to decisions that reflect your personal values. Perhaps you've always made a point of donating to causes close to your heart or indulging in small treats now and then to maintain your sense of joy. But now you hesitate. You question whether spending money on something seemingly unnecessary might be seen as selfish or irresponsible by those around you. The freedom to decide what matters to you and how to spend your money, however small the decision, is compromised. I once spoke with Edward, a 76-year-old man who moved in with his daughter and son-in-law after surgery. At first, they insisted on managing his finances so he could focus on his recovery. But after months of this, when Edward tried to buy a birthday gift for his granddaughter or donate to a cause he supported, his daughter would ask, "Do you really need to spend money on that right now?" This simple question made Edward feel as though he needed permission to be generous, something he had never experienced before. What's so painful about this change isn't just about the financial loss, it's about what money represents. Freedom, responsibility, and the agency to decide how you live your life. When these choices start being filtered through someone else's priorities, it can feel less like care and more like control. You may begin to second-guess your purchases, delay decisions, or even hide small expenses, just to avoid the subtle judgment you feel coming from your family. This shift happens slowly and often without confrontation. There's no direct argument, no obvious conflict. Just a gradual narrowing of your freedom, like walking down a hallway that gets tighter with every step. And what makes this especially difficult is that it's all done under the guise of love and concern. But love, when it disregards your autonomy, doesn't feel like love, it feels like quiet confinement. How do you navigate this shift? And what steps can you take to reclaim your financial independence, even in such an arrangement? What happens when that sense of control is quietly taken away? Reason 8. Shift in family dynamics and authority. Moving in with your children can subtly, but profoundly alter the entire structure of the family dynamic. One moment, you are the parent, the one who raised them, made the rules, and held authority. The next moment, you find yourself in a situation where you must adapt to their household, their routines, and their decisions. This shift isn't a reflection of unkindness or disrespect from your children. In fact, they may be doing their best to be considerate. But the reality is, when you live under someone else's roof, even your own children's, the balance changes. What you once controlled or influenced in your own home now becomes something you have to adjust to. You may notice yourself adapting to new meal times, conversations you're not always a part of, or decisions being made without your input. Slowly, you may even realize that your opinions are being gently dismissed, not out of malice but out of habit. The child who once sought your advice now moves forward with their plans, assuming you'll simply go along without much thought. For many older adults, this change begins subtly. At first, it may not seem significant, but over time, it grows into a quiet discomfort. The role you once held as a central figure in family decisions starts to slip away. You're no longer the person people turn to for guidance. Instead, you become the person who is updated after things have already been decided. I think of Carol, a 70-year-old woman who moved in with her son and daughter-in-law after her lease ended. She was initially happy, even grateful. But as time passed, she began to notice a shift. They no longer asked for her opinion about weekend plans. They didn't consult her when making decisions about household purchases. One evening, as she sat in the living room, her son and daughter-in-law casually discussed selling the car she once used to drive. They didn't ask her for her input. They didn't even acknowledge her presence in the conversation. It was as if she wasn't there. That night, Carol confided in me, "I raised him to be independent. I just didn't expect to feel so irrelevant in the process." This wasn't about wanting control or dominance over the decisions being made, it was about dignity. The authority she once held in her home came from love, responsibility, and the experience of raising her children. Losing that authority, especially when it happens quietly, can feel like you're disappearing from the inside out. When your voice begins to fade in the very family you built, it can leave you questioning where you stand. It's not just a shift in roles, it's a shift in respect. It's how you see yourself in the world. It's the feeling of being overlooked, as if your presence, your wisdom, and your role no longer matter as much as they once did. This loss is often not dramatic or overt. It's a quiet erosion of your sense of self, your place in the family, and the role you've held for so many years. If this resonates with you or someone you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please comment number 8 below to let me know you're here, and if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so. Your support helps us continue to create content that informs and inspires. Let's move on. Do you or someone you know identify with Carol's experience? How have you managed the shift in authority and respect that can come with moving in with children? Reason 9. Loss of personal space and identity. When you decide to move in with your children, one of the first and most profound changes you experience is the loss of personal space. It's not just about the physical room you sleep in, but the deeper sense of ownership over your life and your surroundings. Initially, this shift might not feel like a loss at all. You might tell yourself it's simply a change of scenery, a practical adjustment to your circumstances. But as time moves on, you start to notice something unsettling. You no longer have a place that truly feels like yours. At first, it may seem insignificant, perhaps even comforting to be close to family. But as the days pass, you begin to feel a subtle shift. The kitchen becomes someone else's domain, the living room feels less like your space, and even the thermostat settings seem out of your control. You might find yourself hesitating before opening a kitchen cabinet, or wondering if you're taking up too much space in a home that no longer feels like yours. The everyday choices you once took for granted, where to sit, what to eat, when to turn on the lights, are now subject to others' routines and expectations. And then, quietly but powerfully, a question starts to emerge within you. Where do I fit in now? This is not about ingratitude or conflict. It's about something much deeper. It's about how space serves as an anchor for our sense of self. Over the years, our homes become more than just buildings filled with furniture. They become repositories of our memories, our routines, our dignity. Your home holds the essence of who you are, and when you step away from it, even for practical reasons, there's a sense that you may have traded your independence for a feeling of obligation. I remember John, a 74-year-old man who moved in with his daughter after a mild stroke. At first he felt relieved, even grateful. But after a few months, he caught himself whispering on phone calls, waiting for permission to watch his favorite TV shows, and avoiding cooking the meals he once loved because the smells felt too strong for a space that wasn't truly his. He said to me, "I used to feel like a man with a home. Now, I feel like a guest with a suitcase." That simple sentence stayed with me because it captured something so many people experience but struggle to express. It's not about pride or stubbornness, it's about autonomy. Having your own space, even if it's just a small corner of the house, gives you the power to make decisions that remind you that you're still in control of your life. When that space is taken away, when every decision, big or small, is influenced by someone else, it can feel like you've lost a piece of yourself. You don't stop being who you are, but when that inner voice that once said, "This is my home. This is my day. This is my routine," starts to quiet, you begin to feel like you don't quite fit in anymore. You're not just feeling invisible in a literal sense, but also in a deeper, emotional way. The place where you once felt anchored is no longer your own, and that can make you feel like you've lost a part of yourself. Does this resonate with your own experience or perhaps someone close to you? How do you cope with these subtle shifts in your sense of self when your living situation changes? Final thoughts. As we've explored, moving in with your children while offering comfort and closeness can bring about changes that affect your sense of identity, independence, and emotional well-being. The subtle shifts, loss of personal space, changes in family dynamics, and the gradual fading of your role can leave you feeling disconnected, not only from others but from yourself. The sacrifice of silencing your needs or losing your sense of purpose is often invisible but profound. It's a complex journey, one that requires both self-compassion and open dialogue with those you love. If you're navigating this transition, know that you're not alone. These feelings of emotional isolation, loss of purpose, or even the quiet struggle to find your voice are shared by many. It's important to recognize these changes and give yourself permission to express your needs, to reclaim your sense of self, and to seek the emotional validation you deserve. Your worth is not tied to what you can do for others, but to the richness of your experiences, wisdom, and the love you share. If you found these insights helpful or if they've resonated with your experience, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts or personal experiences. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to stay connected. Your support helps us continue creating content that encourages deeper understanding and empowers you to live a fuller, more balanced life. Remember, you deserve to be seen, heard, and valued. Stay kind to yourself, and take the steps to reconnect with your true self, no matter the stage of life you're in. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.